ready to go, that as well.
It is, isn't it?
Yep.
So, I mean, there's just a lot of things going on there.
In a completely secretive raid, the FBI infiltrated Rick Harrison's mansion in the outskirts of Henderson, Nevada. While the public was still puzzled by the unusual absence of the show Pawn Stars for almost a year, federal agents uncovered a surprising detail that led the investigation in a completely new direction: a secret tunnel which had not been recorded in any architectural blueprints or property registries. This tunnel was cleverly hidden beneath the wine cellar of the mansion, an area that had received little attention in the public photographs, and what they found inside made the entire investigative team shudder. Missing antiques, decomposed human remains, and signs of something far darker than mere antique smuggling. The question was no longer just, did Rick Harrison commit a crime, but rather, who built this tunnel? What was its purpose? And how could such a horrifying secret have been hidden right beneath the life of a famous person like him for so many years? 1. Why the FBI turned its attention to Rick Harrison's mansion. No FBI investigation begins with vague hypotheses. The decision to break into the home of a famous television personality like Rick Harrison, who had been the face of a hit show running for 16 seasons, certainly wasn't made based on baseless rumors. In fact, this investigation had been quietly prepared for several years, with numerous clues, signs of unusual activity, and hidden secrets that had never been revealed about the operations of Gold and Silver Pawn, the legendary pawn shop that Rick and his family run. Since 2018, European cultural heritage organizations had discovered that artifacts reported as stolen from museums in Greece, Iraq, and Syria had suddenly appeared on private auction platforms in the United States. Some of these items, according to reliable sources, had even been unofficially appraised at Rick's pawn shop. An Egyptian stone statue over 2,000 years old, and reported stolen in Cairo in 2015, was found in an episode of Pawn Stars aired in 2019. Although the show had never confirmed selling this item, the image of the statue and the caption, "This is a replica," was strongly refuted by researchers who found cracks that matched the original museum records. But this wasn't the only instance. In mid-2022, a civil investigation from Interpol sent its findings to the FBI after discovering artifacts owned by the government of Iraq being sold on the darknet. These artifacts were not publicly listed yet. They showed signs of being appraised by American experts. One name that kept coming up in the files: Rick Harrison. Within the FBI, the Cultural Property, Art, and Antiquities Program officially placed Rick Harrison under surveillance. However, due to public factors and the influence of reality television, every step was taken with extreme caution. Transactions related to Gold and Silver Pawn began to be thoroughly examined. Then, at the beginning of 2024, a small detail changed the entire course of the investigation. An anonymous person sent a handwritten letter to the FBI office in Las Vegas, accompanied by a rough, hand-drawn map outlining the tunnel system beneath Rick's house, with a short message: "Not just antiques, there are bodies down there." The identity of the sender has not been confirmed. However, this letter, combined with previously discovered anomalies, was enough to prompt the FBI to launch Operation Silver Dust, a covert investigation to verify the authenticity of this lead. Over the course of nearly 6 months, the investigation teams used thermal imaging technology from commercial satellites to detect unusual temperature fluctuations around the mansion's grounds. A hotspot, shaped like an underground corridor, appeared at night, repeating in a 3-day cycle. The FBI identified it as potentially being a hidden entrance or pathway. At the same time, financial investigators discovered that Rick held a trust fund worth over $12.5 million in the Cayman Islands. The trust had been established in 2020, shortly after the Pandora Papers documents raised concerns about offshore funds. The money flowing into this trust came from untraceable payments that bypassed traditional banking systems. Although there was no direct evidence, the clues continued to accumulate. Rick Harrison still frequently appeared on social media, maintaining the image of a cheerful middle-aged man who loved history and often shared interesting artifacts with his followers. However, in the shadows, pieces of a much larger mystery were slowly coming to light. A man with deep knowledge of antiques, wide connections with the auction world, and extensive travels to the Middle East and Europe, now caught in the storm of suspicion that his lavish mansion was not just a place of rest, but the center of a vast international underground network. The big question was, did Rick truly know everything happening beneath his house? Or was he just a pawn in a much more complex criminal network? To answer this question, the FBI had no other choice. They had to carry out a raid. And it all began on a quiet early morning, seemingly uneventful at first. 2. The raid. The warrant and the disturbing detail. In early March 2025 at 4:27 a.m., when the city of Henderson, Nevada was still sound asleep, a federal task force from the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) began carrying out a raid that had been kept secret for weeks. The target of the raid was Rick Harrison's mansion, a 2-story house blending classic Spanish architecture with minimalist modern design located in a secluded neighborhood with 24/7 security gates. Every detail had been meticulously planned. Rick had not been warned in advance, and there were no signs of any information leaks from local authorities. This was no longer just an administrative investigation. It was a search for the truth that had been buried beneath the ground for far too long. At 4:32 a.m., the first armored FBI SUV began moving through the main gate. The vehicle's headlights were completely turned off, and agents dressed in full black bulletproof gear used an electronically controlled key, approved by the court, to unlock the door. Within less than 2 minutes, the entire mansion was under FBI control. Rick Harrison was awakened from his sleep in a state of total confusion. According to an internal report, later his first response was to ask, "You've got the wrong person." However, they did not have the wrong person. While one group of agents secured the safety of the family members inside, another group began a preliminary scan of the mansion's structure using a handheld LiDAR device, a tool that allowed them to create a real-time 3D map to compare with the house's blueprints. This technology helped them detect an anomaly, an underground space that was not on the blueprints, located about 5 meters off from the position of the wine cellar. At 5:10 a.m., they found a detail that agents later described as the first spine-chilling discovery: a metal floor panel weighing approximately 90 kilograms hidden beneath the carefully restored wooden floor. Under ultraviolet light, the surface of the panel revealed scratches, signs that it had been opened multiple times recently. Next to the panel was a high-end electronic lock, a type not commonly used in residential design. It took more than 10 minutes to break the lock without triggering an internal self-destruct code. When the trapdoor was opened, a cold wave of air smelling of mold, burning metal, and something akin to decomposing flesh rushed up, causing one of the agents to immediately vomit. Below was a narrow stone staircase with more than 20 steps leading down to a concrete tunnel with soundproofed walls. The old recessed ceiling lights were still on, though some bulbs were flickering, indicating that the underground electrical system was still functioning. No one knew how long the tunnel was, but from prior imaging data, the FBI estimated it stretched at least 40 meters with several turns. The leading team, commanded by Special Agent SSA Nathan Brooks, moved forward in combat-ready formation. The deeper they went, the more damp and pungent the air became. The room was sealed off immediately. Rick Harrison, who was now sitting in the living room with handcuffs, was instructed to remain absolutely silent. He did not resist, but his face was ashen. When asked, "Did you know there's a tunnel and a body beneath your house?" Rick responded, "I've never been down there." This answer would become the key to the entire investigation. 3. Inside the tunnel. The basement beneath Rick Harrison's mansion was not just an ordinary illegal storage space. It was meticulously designed as an underground system with a solid structure, separate ventilation and lighting systems, and reinforced with industrial soundproofing materials. This is what led FBI experts to not consider it a hidden annex, but instead a calculated and highly technical structure that must have taken months, if not years, to complete without being detected by neighbors or local authorities. The first room in the basement, referred to as Room A, appeared to be used as a display or storage area for valuable artifacts. On numbered wooden shelves, the forensic team found items that collectors referred to as priceless but unseen, meaning they were too valuable to be publicly displayed, but could not be sold on the open market, due to their unclear origins or reports of being stolen. In one corner of the room was a black stone statue carved with ancient Sumerian script, which could only be found in the Mesopotamian region. Next to it was a box made of ebony wood containing Roman gold coins featuring Caesar Augustus, one of which was confirmed to have once belonged to the collection of the National Museum of Italy, stolen in 1999. On a shelf along the left wall were books bound in human skin, written with ancient graphite ink, describing Egyptian religious rituals, artifacts banned in the United States due to their mystical and sacred nature. In addition to the artifacts, the investigators also found a handwritten inventory list, detailing item codes, names of the objects, the date they were added to stock, and in some entries the note "gone." This vague term led experts to believe that this could be a hub for an illicit trade of artifacts which Rick Harrison or someone else had been using to cater to special clients willing to pay hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars for items that museums around the world could never acquire. However, when the investigators moved into the second room, later referred to as the death room, in news broadcasts, the entire case shifted from a suspected artifact smuggling operation to a multiple murder investigation. The second room did not have wooden shelves or display lights. Instead, there were metal tables resembling those in a morgue, some of which still had body parts that had not fully decomposed, covered with clear plastic sheets. In the corner of the room was a trash can filled with rubber gloves, blood-stained medical aprons, test tubes, and anesthetics. It was clear that this room had been used as a body processing center, or worse, a torture chamber. Initially, 32 sets of remains were recorded. Each set was placed separately in temporary body bags without any specific numbering. Some remains showed signs of broken bones, suggesting they had been subjected to heavy impacts, while others had injuries to the skull, possibly from being struck by a hard object. Notably, 11 bodies showed signs of being bound while alive with deep rope marks around the wrists and ankles. One body even had a deep cut on the abdomen, which was determined to have occurred before the victim died. In an investigative report later published by Dr. Catherine Liu, an FBI forensic expert, she stated, "Most of the victims did not die instantly. They endured a prolonged torture process before their deaths. The level of violence in the case suggests that this was not just a murder to cover up evidence, but also potentially a criminal act involving multiple people, indicating organized crime DNA from 3 of the victims matched the missing persons reports from Las Vegas and Phoenix. Among them was Stephen Aldridge, a former camera system maintenance employee for the television network that produced Pawn Stars, who had disappeared in 2016. Stephen's missing persons case had previously been overlooked due to a lack of evidence. However, his body was now found right beneath the villa of a person who had been a central figure in the show. The room also left behind another chilling clue, a concrete wall covered with printed portraits of the victims beneath which were coded markings. This could be a form of processing list, or perhaps a tracking chart. The FBI has yet to make a conclusion, but they confirm that this is extremely unusual evidence never seen before in any investigation related to reality television. A particularly noteworthy detail in a small metal box buried under the floor of the second room, the forensic team found a notebook with Rick Harrison's signature. The notebook recorded items, entry dates, estimated values, and the markings KQ, NV, TT. Although these codes have not been fully deciphered, the FBI suspects they are part of an internal coding system, possibly related to the status of the subjects being processed. Experts in antique smuggling consulted by the FBI all agreed that if these items were sold at international auctions or circulated in black markets, the total value of the artifact stash could exceed 50 million USD. However, the most haunting question still remains unanswered. Why were there so many bodies? And why were they stored in the same space as the antiques? Could this be not just a hiding place, but a link in a chain of activities involving murder, antique trading, and eliminating witnesses? The investigation was immediately expanded in multiple directions. The entire underground complex was sealed off, securely protected by multiple layers of security, with new surveillance cameras installed and armed guards assigned 24/7. Internal FBI reports indicated the discovery of 47 blood samples that did not match any of the bodies found, suggesting that the actual number of victims could be much higher. Rick Harrison continued to remain silent in the early stages. His attorney stated that he had no knowledge of this tunnel system and affirmed he would fully cooperate with authorities. However, with the discoveries made beneath the ground, remaining silent may no longer be enough to protect him from legal charges. 4. The chilling theories. After the images of the secret basement and the decomposing bodies found inside Rick Harrison's mansion were leaked to the media, the public was left in a state of shock and disbelief. However, for the investigators, the panic that followed was just the tip of the iceberg. What they were truly focused on and trying to uncover was the real purpose behind the tunnel. Why would a famous person once adored and admired by millions have an underground system filled with human corpses, antiques, and a plethora of evidence related to a criminal organization? Within the FBI, two main theories quickly emerged and were investigated simultaneously. One was the witness elimination theory, targeting individuals who knew too much about illegal activities. The second theory was the underground auction house theory, a secret location for trading antiques, catering to the elite who wish to remain unbound by laws or publicize their assets. The first theory stemmed from a crucial but accidental discovery. A DNA sample from bloodstains on the floor of the room containing the bodies matched the records of Miguel Santos, a delivery driver who had worked for Gold and Silver Pawn in 2014. Santos had gone missing at the end of that year, leaving no trace behind. His family had reported his disappearance, but the case was closed after 18 months due to the lack of new information. Not only was Santos involved, but 3 other victims among the bodies found had indirect connections to the store or behind-the-scenes events of the show. Pawn Stars. One was an employee responsible for the logistics of the movie props, while another was a freelance appraiser who had worked on several recording episodes. They all disappeared without a trace between 2013 and 2019. A more disturbing detail surfaced when investigators analyzed Rick Harrison's computer, which was seized at the scene. On the encrypted hard drive, they found a series of meticulously kept log files written in coded language. One entry from 2017 read, "The informant is no longer needed. The shipment has arrived in Zurich." Although this sentence seemed harmless when compared to the disappearance of a rare antiques broker named Bernard Tolland, who had contacted Rick via email. As uncovered, the picture became clearer. Each time an antique was shipped abroad, it seemed that someone connected to it would disappear. Dr. Eliza Corrigan, a criminologist at Georgetown University, commented, "That basement could be the endpoint for the weak links in the chain of a smuggling network. The fewer the witnesses, the lower the risk of being caught. The discovery of the bodies along with the antiques further illustrates the connection between murder and the financial gains from illegal transactions." The second theory revolves around the black profit objective. According to financial records that Rick failed to declare on his personal income between 2018 and 2023, investigators discovered several high-value repeated transactions ranging from $150,000 to over $2 million that had been transferred into anonymous accounts in Switzerland, Belgium, and the United Arab Emirates. The origins of these funds were unclear, not passing through any legitimate trading channels, and coincided with the times when antiques appeared in the basement. An anonymous figure who had previously worked in the international auction industry, keeping their identity secret for safety reasons, revealed, "We know that there are secret auctions where no checks are required, no paperwork needed. The seller just needs to have a valuable item, and the buyer, usually the wealthy or collectors, will pay with cryptocurrency or physical gold. Everything takes place in the dark. The FBI currently suspects that the basement under Rick Harrison's mansion was designed as a secure gallery, a place where guests can view items directly in a private space that cannot be eavesdropped on or recorded. The structure of the tunnel, the lighting system, and the soundproofing all resemble the black galleries that have been discovered in Turkey and Ukraine. Among the seized documents, there is a guest list with initials, nationalities, and dates of visits to the basement. Some of the codes match up with Eastern European billionaires and Middle Eastern officials who have previously been suspected of involvement in cultural artifact smuggling. A photo found on Rick's phone, which had been deleted but successfully recovered, shows him standing next to someone believed to be Hans Gruber, a former director of an international cultural preservation organization, who is currently under investigation for being linked to missing artifacts from the Louvre Museum. This hypothesis, if confirmed, would not only point to the crime of smuggling cultural artifacts, but also to the existence of an international network involving wealthy, powerful individuals who are capable of manipulating information to protect their interests. At that time, Rick Harrison might not just have been the owner of an antique store, but also the gatekeeper to a shadowy world where history is traded like any other commodity. An even more frightening possibility that investigators are considering is that both hypotheses could be true. The basement could have served as both a display area for underground collectors and a termination point for those who knew too much or became a threat. This would explain why the system in the basement was built securely with full facilities ranging from lighting to odor and temperature control, enough to preserve a body without detection for decades, Dr. Corrigan commented. Once crime is legitimized through profit, murder becomes just a cost of operations. This chilling statement reflects the grim reality of non-traditional criminal systems that modern law enforcement is struggling to handle. However, regardless of the hypothesis, Rick Harrison cannot deny his direct involvement in what has been discovered. His fingerprints were found in both rooms. His DNA was found on 2 cups in the display room. And most importantly, Rick's handwriting appears on several notes, inventories, and journals. A big question remains to be answered. Is Rick the mastermind, or just a pawn in a bigger scheme? And if he is not the only one, who else is lurking in the shadows? 5. The strange connection. The discovery of priceless artifacts worth millions of dollars in a secret basement beneath Rick Harrison's mansion not only caused a media frenzy, but also immediately sparked a wave of alarm within the international artifact smuggling surveillance community. Within 72 hours of the raid being made public, numerous heritage preservation agencies from Europe and the Middle East quickly reached out to the FBI, providing information about stolen items from museums and archaeological sites, which had now been found right under the roof of a reality TV star's home. Among the artifacts uncovered, the most significant was a cuneiform stone tablet dating back to the 21st century BCE, which was confirmed to be part of the collection of the Iraq National Museum. The tablet was last recorded in the database in 2003, just before Iraq descended into chaos after the war. Iraq's Heritage Management Agency had been tracking the whereabouts of this tablet for over 2 decades and had suspected that it had fallen into the hands of an artifact smuggling network based in Cyprus, a well-known hub in the black market for artifacts. Not only was that tablet found, but the FBI also seized 2 Byzantine gold coins from Greece, a gold funerary mask believed to be of Nubian origin, and a religious silk painting from the Ming dynasty, all of which had never appeared on the international market. According to reports from Interpol and UNESCO, all these items were on the list of irreplaceable lost artifacts, meaning they are considered an essential part of each country's historical identity and cannot be copied or replaced. The presence of these items in the U.S., particularly in Rick Harrison's mansion, raised suspicions that he was not just a collector of artifacts, but may also be an important link in an international smuggling network, where artifacts are transported from conflict zones through black markets and eventually end up in the hands of Western collectors at prices that are hundreds of times higher than their true value. This is not without precedent. According to a report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime 2023, The global value of the illicit antiquities trade is estimated to exceed $3 billion annually, mostly carried out through unofficial channels such as third-party transactions, anonymous auctions, or off-the-record appraisals. Rick Harrison, with his reputation as a well-known antiques expert and his claim of having rare sources that even museums don't have, became the perfect target for legitimizing stolen items. Another clue that has drawn the FBI's attention are the shipping records seized at his mansion. The printer there had documents from international shipping companies based in Turkey, the UAE, and Lebanon. Notably, some shipping records listed temporary addresses at transfer hubs in Antwerp, Belgium, Trieste, Italy, and Dubai, Free Zone, locations that are already under EU watch due to their involvement in the illicit cultural heritage trade. In a closed press conference, a senior investigator from the FBI, who had previously been involved in dismantling an antique smuggling ring from Egypt in 2017, stated, "The evidence clearly shows that Rick Harrison, or possibly someone using his name, has been running an opaque system for receiving, authenticating, and distributing antiques, and the basement of the villa is the quality control point before these antiques are delivered to the final customers." Additionally, the FBI discovered a mini server hidden behind a false wall in the basement. After decoding it, the data on the server revealed hundreds of encrypted transactions, including detailed descriptions of the items, transaction dates, client initials, and even the priority level of each transaction. Some transactions were annotated in languages like German, Arabic, and Russian, suggesting that this was a multinational network highly organized and operating with great precision. Not stopping there, the FBI's technology experts also uncovered that some transactions had been paid with cryptocurrency, primarily Monero and Bitcoin, private too digital currencies known for their high security and anonymity features. The total value of the transactions routed through the e-wallet linked to an IP address that had logged in from Rick's villa amounted to over $63 million in just 2 years. This completely rules out the possibility that this was merely a personal collection activity, and further supports the hypothesis that Rick, or someone using his name, is profiting from these illegal activities. In this context, the heritage conservation community and international organizations have ramped up pressure on the U.S. government, demanding that Rick Harrison's case be tried as a landmark case related to international antique smuggling. The International Council of Museums ICOM issued a statement, allowing a public figure of Rick Harrison's stature to participate in an antique smuggling ring is a severe blow to efforts to protect the world's historical heritage. On the contrary, Rick's legal team continues to insist that he had no knowledge of the activities in the basement, suggesting that the villa may have been exploited by someone to conceal criminal acts. However, to date, they have not been able to provide any specific evidence or identity to support this theory. In reality, the basement has existed for at least 10 to 15 years, with an independent electrical and water system, internal surveillance cameras, and specialized equipment for moving objects. The question arises, how could the owner of the house not know about such a complex system right beneath his feet? In the world of investigations, there is an unwritten rule. If something looks like a conspiracy, operates like a conspiracy, and benefits someone, it very likely is a conspiracy. And with every piece of evidence left behind, Rick Harrison is slowly becoming the center of such a conspiracy. 6. Rick Harrison's reaction. As soon as the news of the raid broke, accompanied by images of FBI agents leaving Rick Harrison's mansion with boxes of seized goods and photos from the crime scene showing the presence of a body, Rick's prolonged silence was no longer seen as a strategy to protect his image. Instead, it quickly became regarded as a sign of evasion, even guilt. For the first 48 hours following the revelation of the case, Rick was completely absent from the public eye. His personal social media account was deactivated. The Pawn Star's website on the History Channel was switched to maintenance mode, and his old contact numbers were disconnected. Both the online community and the media were left asking the same question. Where is Rick Harrison? It wasn't until the third day that Rick made his first appearance, attending an initial interrogation with his attorney at the FBI office in Las Vegas. The media was not allowed direct access, but sources close to the situation revealed that the meeting lasted over 6 hours, with Rick responding to all questions with only 2 phrases "I don't know" and "not involved." His primary attorney, Marcus L. Fletcher, who had previously represented several Hollywood figures in complex lawsuits, held a brief press conference during which he stated, "Rick Harrison is the victim of a complicated conspiracy aimed at tarnishing his reputation and personal honor. We categorically deny any knowledge or involvement in any criminal activities reported recently." Almost immediately, numerous legal experts and media analysts countered Fletcher's statement. Dr. Carol Degenhardt, a law professor at Yale University, commented, "Given the level of control Rick has over his brand, it is hard to believe that an underground operation containing millions of dollars worth of artifacts and human remains could exist in his own home without his knowledge." Not long after the FBI released some of the evidence collected at the scene to refute Rick's claims of innocence. The evidence included video footage extracted from an internal camera system showing Rick appearing at least 6 times at the entrance to the basement. With the most recent visit just 2 months prior to the raid, Rick's fingerprints were found on a doorknob, a notebook, and an ancient stone statue. Additionally, an encrypted email sent from an IP-dependent account at the mansion revealed Rick communicating with an unknown individual about a package that needed to be checked thoroughly before the client arrived. These pieces of evidence not only completely contradict Rick and his attorney's claims that he knew nothing, but they also suggest that he played a role in coordinating at least part of the activities taking place under his own roof. Nevertheless, Rick's legal team refused to give up. They began to roll out a strategy of sowing doubt, suggesting that Rick may have been taken advantage of by someone in the past, possibly a business partner, a family member, or a former employee. In subsequent television interviews, Fletcher implied Rick is not a technical person, and it's very possible he didn't fully understand what was going on in his own facility. This strategy was not new, but in Rick's case, it seemed to increase public suspicion. On online forums, hundreds of thousands of comments were made, with many people arguing that the Antiques King couldn't possibly have been unaware of a display basement right under his own house. A prominent comment on Reddit, which received over 30,000 upvotes, read, "This guy could appraise a 19th century rifle just by looking at the lock mechanism. He knows every corner of history. There's no way he didn't know there was a basement containing a dead body in his own house." Not only that, some members of Rick's family also began to turn their backs on him. Corey Harrison, Rick's son, who had once co-starred with him on the show, Pawn Stars, posted a cryptic message on Instagram. "Not everything we think is family really is." Shortly after his account was switched to private, David Renholm, a crisis communication expert, remarked, "Rick is stuck in a dilemma. He's either a fool or a criminal. Either way, his public image has completely collapsed. Legally, the situation has become even more severe. The U.S. Department of Justice has officially announced a criminal investigation with potential indictments on multiple serious charges, such as unlawful possession of human remains, transnational antiquities, trafficking, obstruction of criminal evidence, and involvement in organized crime. In the worst-case scenario, if charged and convicted with sufficient evidence, Rick Harrison could face life imprisonment or even the maximum penalty if it's proven that he directly caused the death of any victim." To defend himself, Rick's legal team filed a motion to dismiss some of the evidence, arguing it was improperly obtained, but documents indicate that the FBI followed proper procedures when securing the search warrants. Additionally, the tunnel's absence from construction records may serve as a basis for investigating potential fraud in building disclosures and real estate tax evasion, an angle the IRS is now pursuing separately. Finally, in a brief interview on CBS, Rick broke his silence. With a weary expression, he said, "I'm just a guy who sells antiques. I didn't kill anyone. If anything happened, someone used me. I don't want to die in prison for things I didn't do." However, no matter how sincere Rick's words may have sounded ahead of him, lies a courtroom journey clouded in doubt, and behind him a cold basement filled with undeniable secrets. When news of the investigation was leaked, Pawn Stars, once the pride of the History Channel, was abruptly taken off the air without notice. The show's official website was suspended, and all commercial activity associated with it was frozen, pending investigation. Replays on streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu were swiftly removed within 72 hours. The primary production company, Left Field Pictures, issued a statement declaring they were unaware of and unconnected to any illegal actions committed by Rick Harrison. Public reaction was sharply divided. A portion of viewers, especially those who once saw Rick as a history teacher through television, felt shocked and betrayed. Forums like Reddit's RR Television were flooded with posts titled, "My childhood shattered beneath the concrete floor of that basement. And how can we trust reality TV ever again?" Some longtime fans even organized a No Pawn Stars Day in protest of the man they once idolized. However, another group has continued to defend Rick, claiming he's a victim of a media takedown. A wave of hashtags like #IStandWithRick spread across Facebook and X, along with conspiracy theories suggesting Rick is being framed because he knows too much about the black market antiquities trade. Old clips from Pawn Stars began resurfacing, especially moments when Rick refused to buy suspicious items, or his famous line, "I won't buy it unless I know exactly where it came from." Rick Harrison, though not yet convicted, has already lost the most valuable thing, trust. When that trust is buried alongside the bodies underground, all that remains is the decaying legacy of an empire once revered worldwide. The truth has finally come to light. However, the repercussions for the victims' families, the antiquities trade, and an entire generation of viewers may continue to unfold for many years to come. So, what are your thoughts on this entire case? Is Rick truly innocent, or has this all been an elaborate performance meticulously orchestrated over the years? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section below. If this story has left you stunned, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next case we'll be investigating.